Hi everyone, good afternoon. It's our last session of the day, so we weren't sure what to expect in the little corner room back here, but we are so excited that so many of you are here today to learn how to embrace the F word. And I promise that was part of our title before it got brought up in the keynote. We actually submitted it and it was taken off our title from Pat, probably because it seemed a little inappropriate, but that was our hook. Because we know how everyone feels when the word fidelity gets dropped in schools. So we are excited today to share a lot about our system at Forest City Regional Elementary School, talk about what fidelity is, and some tips and tricks to help manage and sustain. So today, I'll go first since I'm right here. So I'm Larissa Valonis, and I am not only our PBIS co-coach in our elementary school, but I'm also the elementary school counselor in our building. In addition to that, I'm the school counseling department chair, essentially. So that is just a little bit about me.
My name is Sarah Reddick. I'm a third grade teacher. I've been in that position for 5 years, and this is my third year as a PBIS co-coach.
And I'm Mike Zach. I'm the elementary principal at Forest City Regional. There is a reason for this. We'll get to it soon. And this is my 5th year as elementary school principal. Prior to that, I was a teacher in the high school at Forest City for 7 years. Who is Forest City Regional Elementary School? Kind of want to give you a little bit of background, so as we go through the presentation, you have a little bit of information as to what our structure looks like so that you can kind of look at how this might work in your schools or your districts. So we're a super small school district in Northeast PA. We're on the corner of Lackawanna, Susquehanna, and Wayne counties, about 30 minutes north of Scranton. We have one physical building, pre-K through 12, housing all of our students, which is about 820 across that span. About 444 students in the elementary school, which is pre-K through 6 right now. Teachers and support staff, 58. That is just the elementary school numbers. Economically disadvantaged, we're right around 68% or so. Title I school-wide building for reading. This summer we had 40 new enrollments into the district. About 70% of those students had IEPs, and we are at district-wide about 22% of our students with an IEP. Kind of just to give you a little background as to PBIS and why we're here. We have been recognized at Tier 1 and Tier 2 since 2019, and we've been coached to apply for Tier 3 recognition by our regional facilitator who is in the room. We kind of pulled back on that and said, like, we don't feel ready. We kind of go by the mantra pretty often that no sense in doing it if we don't feel we're doing it well. And so this year we're working towards that Tier 3. We've kind of embraced, and that's our goal. But just kind of a little overview of who we are. And then what does PBIS look like for Forest City Regional Elementary School, and how do we kind of embrace that? So the first thing you'll see there is Foresters Rock. So we're the Forest City Foresters, and our theme this year is Foresters Rock. So everything we kind of do throughout the year, we embrace that theme, we pull it in, and the nice part about that is it is one of our ways to include students, families, and teachers in selecting that theme every year. So at the end of the school year, students get to submit their ideas. We do a poll within the classrooms, and all the kids kind of get a say in what that's going to be for the next year. And we really embrace that and kind of make a big deal out of it. Hence, this is my Halloween costume yesterday, but the kids really love it, and that's kind of why we do what we do. But other pieces, 1.5 school counselors, which is certainly not enough, but we have Mrs. Valonis, who is pre-K to 4th grade, and then we have another counselor who's 5th through 8th, so she's shared with the high school. We do have a lot of mental health supports for a district our size. We have a collaboration with Friendship House, which provides a lot of services in our school building, which is really awesome, including outpatient therapy. We have a school social worker. We also kind of really look at community-based, which also has our school nurse practitioner, which does providing medication right in our school, which is great because many of our families don't have access to transportation. And our expectations in our elementary school are following the R's, so ready, respectful, responsible. And every day in the morning announcements, we follow the mantra of we're a Forster family. which means we take care of ourselves, we take care of each other, we take care of this place. And we embraced that last year because we had so many conversations with kids, like, what does that look like in your family? And we realized that based on our population, kids didn't know what family looked like. So we kind of embraced that and took into using that phrase so they know what that means. And the one goal we have this year for who we are is expanding our outpatient services a little bit further with adding some outpatient therapy supports in addition to what we currently have. And what we're looking at today, our set list for rocking it this afternoon is implementing with Fidelity. How do we do that? That F word. Fidelity checks, what they look like, how you can use some of what we've done to help in your buildings. Managing and sustaining using practical strategies and processes. So, again, we're very vested in doing things right the first time and making tweaks and adaptations to be sure we have a system that works. And then utilizing data to guide decision making. We do that all the time in basically everything we do. A lot of people say you're making things harder on yourselves. Well, no, in the long run, we're making it easier, but it does take time. So that's kind of what we're looking at for this afternoon.
All right, so to get started, we're going to do a poll. If you could get your phone out, there's a QR code on the side. Once you scan that QR code, it's going to take you to a link that has these 4 questions on it, and which describes you. Number 1, do you feel your current interventions are not effective to meet the needs of your students? Number 2, you're always seeking to add one more thing to your full plate of already existing interventions. Number 3, you feel your framework is unsustainable, or 4 is all of the above. So please answer honestly.
They don't all, if one of them doesn't fit, choose one that's closest.
All right, so it looks like all of our votes are in, and 1, 2, and 4 are pretty similar in responses. So number 1, a lot of us are feeling like our current interventions are not effective to meet the needs of our students. So we try so hard to put these interventions in place, but we're not seeing the outcomes that we would like. Number 2, we're always seeking to add one more thing. We know what that feels like. You hear something, we think this is great for us, but it adds a lot of stress to your everyday school day. Number 3, believe your framework is unsustainable. It's good to see that there's lower votes for this. And then number 4, all of the above. So we're all kind of feeling the same way, that we're feeling overwhelmed with our program and interventions, and we're looking to strengthen them.
I have to keep going down every time, so I can't reach the mic. So that takes us right into Fidelity, right? We heard that a lot already today in our opening keynote, and a lot of the breakout sessions I've gone to is like, how do we improve the outcomes for students? Well, a lot of it does come down to how are we implementing, and when we're doing it with Fidelity, sometimes that's when we are seeing those outcomes. A lot of up there, that F word, Fidelity, refers to the degree to which an intervention is delivered as intended. We kind of broke a lot of that into 3 basic general ideas: time, resources, and energy. When you think about time, which we never feels like we have enough, right? Because you have your regular school day jobs, and some of us have your full-time job, and then in addition to that, you're coaching and doing all the extra things. Even if this being a coach is your full-time job, you probably still feel like it's not enough time. The planning, the preparing, the communicating, because if you want to, ensure everyone is on the same page, communication takes a lot of time, although it's important. The delivering, the managing, the evaluating, the progress monitoring, there's so many components to time, but it is so important. Resources, human, capital, financial, all of those are so important. And so not only as a team, but as a building, as a district, there's a lot of moving parts where people need to buy in and make sure that you are supported financially. And lastly, which sometimes feels like, You are trying your best, but that energy component, right? Like, do you have the motivation? Do you have that enthusiasm to ensure that your kids are buying into what you're selling? I could have, which leads me to our next slide, I can have such an amazing evidence-based intervention, and I have the script, and I have the kids that are a part of the research, like they meet everything, it sounds perfect, and I am in front of them, and I am just so tired. They're not buying into what I'm selling. Yeah, we have to bring the enthusiasm, we have to buy into what we're selling in order to, we have to model what we expect from them. We know that. And so I think this quote is pretty critical to consider. High quality implementation of a poor program may be more effective than low quality of a best practice program. So I want you to sit and think about that for a second. And why do you think that is? Why do you think a high quality implementation maybe yields better outcomes than having a best practice program, but having that low quality? Why do you think that is? Any thoughts? You can just shout out. You don't have to raise your hand. Joe, go ahead. I know you are itching your chest to speak. Go ahead.
Because sometimes a little bit of high quality intervention or prevention will go a long way. And if you know you're doing it with Fidelity, you can always go back and change it because you know where the barriers might be at.
Yeah, that quality of delivery is so important. So I want you to just think about this the next time, your district asks you to add the one more thing. Right? See what you're doing and see if what you can adjust what you're doing to fit what is in different components of an evidence-based program that maybe you can't afford to purchase, or maybe you don't have enough books to share amongst all of your colleagues. But think about that the next time there is implementation questions.
So when we were researching into Fidelity, one of the things that struck me was that until recently, little emphasis has been placed on Fidelity implementation in both science and practice, and as a result, Fidelity is just not recognized overall. So we wanted to highlight 4 components of program Fidelity that you should be aiming for in your program. So the first one is adherence, which refers to whether the program, service, or intervention is being delivered as it was designed or written. So like Larissa said, are you delivering it to the correct population or the appropriate population? Is everyone trained to be providing this service? Do you have the right materials? Do you have the right procedures in place? So making sure that before you start, you have the foundation set. Number 2 is exposure, making sure that you're following different components of the program. So the number of sessions, lengths of each session, and the frequency of the program as it was designed to be implemented. Number 3 is the quality of program delivery, making sure that the teachers have a great enthusiastic attitude, they have the skills in place to deliver this high quality program. And number 4 is participant responsiveness, making sure that the students you have in front of you are engaged in the activities and that it's meaningful to them. We had talked about something at our school last year that we failed at a little bit. So we tried running a SAP group for grief. And grief is a very tough topic, and there are students who their lives were torn apart. So we were very upset that it just didn't go the right way. So the person had started the grief group for, let's say, 8 sessions and only had about 2, and then the grief group just disbanded. So we reflected on the fidelity of our group implementation back to these 4 components that maybe they weren't in place before we had started, so it wasn't run with fidelity.
And when we're implementing anything, we kind of go back to using these 4 steps as a guide for us and recognizing that kind of like each one is like the leg of a chair. And without one of those legs, it makes it really, really hard to stay balanced on that chair. You can do it, but it's a heck of a lot harder. It's a lot more work than if you have all 4 legs grounded.
Using these 4 components for fidelity implementation provides a type of assurance that your intervention, your outcome data matches the intervention in place and not other factors like you had a great group of students or you had a great facilitator. So just making sure these 4 components are in place. As we just did, you have to acknowledge your issues in your program. So like our grief group, we reflected and went back to those 4 components. So some recommendations to overcome issues with Fidelity. Number 1 is to clarify how Fidelity is defined and conceptualized. So before you start, think about how are you going to track your data? When are you going to? What are you looking for when you're tracking your data? And outline how it's going to be used. Number 2 is consider Fidelity beyond intervention delivery. So maybe you want to do a pre-test, post-test. Make sure that you're tracking it because it will show the impact. Number 3 is consider both enhancement and assessment strategies explicitly. We're going to get into this a little bit later, but self-report checklists could be used, making sure that facilitators are understanding Fidelity as well before they're beginning the intervention, and making sure that the procedures are in place before you begin.
So just to throw in there to kind of give you a practical example, one thing we talk about often is on our SAP meetings, and something comes up and we have our list of interventions that we use for students when they come through SAP and what they are, and we'll be in a meeting and one of the members will say, well, why don't we try pairing this student up with this student and just see if it works. And we kind of look at each other and say, that's not how it works. We can't just pick something and do it and not know what our intended outcome was, not know how we're trying to get it. If we want that to be an intervention, we've got to formalize that, come up with a plan for implementation, and then utilize it, which gets us, as I said in the beginning, kind of that, why are you making this so hard, Mike? Not trying to make it hard, but we have to do it right.
So I know Mike keeps referencing SAP, like our systems in our building are all connected. So you'll hear that a lot, and we're going to go through how we're using data, which it'll come up a little bit. But we, in Pennsylvania, we are required to have our SAP system, but we use SAP it's for everything. So that is kind of our pathway. Our teachers or family members or students themselves can request assistance, goes through SAP, and that's kind of what leads through our MTSS framework. Wanted to do just a little overview listing of some Fidelity checks that are out there. I'm going to talk about the 3.0 because we did that this past spring, and so I'm going to give you some feedback on what that was like. Really, any component to your framework, there is probably already a Fidelity. You literally Google Fidelity check on, check in, check out, and you will get one. Fidelity check of check and connect. It's already out there. Fidelity check on this. So a lot of the things you're already doing, don't go home and say, I got to make all these Fidelity checklists for myself and my school when I go home. It's already out there. It just takes literally a quick Google search. But anytime there is something a little different, like something maybe more general, so a school counseling group, because I run different groups, it might look a little different, but generally they should be run the same way. So maybe if there isn't one specific, I'm looking at things, I'm like, it's not really giving me what I want. I'm going back to the research and I'm just pulling out what are those essential components. And at the end of this wonderful presentation, you'll have a QR code that will give you all of the ones that we use and that we have created. So we do have resources at the end to share with you. One thing that I love when I attend and when we attend different conferences, I like to leave with things in my hand for implementation when I go back, and so we wanted to make sure we gave that to you. So the other thing I'm just going to briefly, when we first were talking about Fidelity checks a few years ago and putting things in place, because we have this advanced tiers manual that talks about all of our interventions, a description, a qualifier, and a link to a Fidelity check. And I always thought, a Fidelity check would be Mr. Zach coming through like a formal evaluation and walking through the classroom and saying, yes, they're doing that. It does not need to be that formal. So an example might be, so in your head, if you're thinking Fidelity checks, who's going to go around, make sure that everybody's doing this stuff? It does not need to look like that. A Fidelity check could literally be your own reminder. So before I start my school counseling group, I am looking over that Fidelity checklist to make sure I hit everything as I'm preparing my lessons, make sure I'm preparing my pre-post test, make sure I'm preparing, I send little notes home to parents so they know exactly what I'm teaching that day. So it's a reminder for yourself as you're carrying out the tasks that you know are important. But it doesn't need to be this formal system because we also know that we don't have time for that. So the 3.0, you might have heard about it. Let me raise your hand. Anybody do the 3.0 yet? Oh, yeah, Janelle. So the 3.0 came out. I got an email sometime last spring just saying, any takers out there that are interested in going through this, and there's still research to be done. But it took, I think we guesstimated about 3 hours to complete. Compared to a TFI that I think we can whip out in like 20 minutes. We know exactly where we stand, what our score would be. So highlights of that, so you know the difference if you are to start talking about it. And there were doing it highlighted some gaps. You know, one thing about Fidelity implementation is that, you know, don't get comfortable. There's always areas of growth, and that doesn't mean start everything new every single year. Just tweak and adjust based on the data that you got. And so the TFI afforded us an opportunity to look at our data, and it focused on things that are not in the TFI that we typically complete, on equity, on mental health, looking at things through a trauma-informed lens, classroom implementation, but really drilling it down. So it was like, it asked such great questions, and you know, you'll see on the bottom there, comparison, same exact year. Look at our scores on the 2.1, 100% on tier 1, tier 2. Holy moly, we're like dropped 50%. And some of the answers we were like, I don't know if our staff can name whatever the question may be. But if you look under the component description changes, those are some highlights. So really connecting to all of your systems, that was a really big takeaway for the 3.0. Like, you know, you're not, crisis safety team isn't doing something different. It's all embedded into one system. And we are getting there. And so to see that, you know, how low we did, and we got recognized because on the 2.1 we were killing it, but when you drill down those details, how much growth there still is. And that information, we put when we did it, we scored it in a spreadsheet, and we had a little note section in the Google Sheets saying like, why did we take away points for ourselves here? And those notes that we made for ourselves are the changes that we worked on for this year. Because, oh my gosh, we could be doing that, but we just, I don't know why we're not doing that. Tweak, adjust. And so we know if we were to do that at the end of this year, that score would already go up. Restorative responses, you know, a lot of these things that we were doing, but maybe not with Fidelity. We had more staff get trained this past summer. Just that overall student wellness, de-escalation with behaviors, like those are the questions that are in the 3.0. So I just encourage you, be curious about it, because it asks great questions. And so if you feel stuck and you're like, we're doing tier 2 and tier 3, but like, it doesn't feel like we're really making an impact, maybe because your data isn't showing you that these are the areas that maybe you need to start examining, because we know when it comes to our student needs, a lot of that is what's at the table that we need to address. Another thing is 5-point scale, not the 0, 1, 2. So that's a big change too.
All right, so just show of hands, let's rate ourselves. How would you rate your PBIS implementation with Fidelity? So starting with 1, it would be not implemented with Fidelity. 2 is partially implemented with Fidelity. 3 is you feel you are mostly implemented with Fidelity. And 4, fully implemented with Fidelity. So if you're comfortable just showing 1 through 4, how you're feeling with Fidelity. So it looks like a mix of 1 through 4, which is great. Awesome.
So it sounds like a lot. And you kind of saw our background of who we are, limited resources, certainly within a small school district, low income, high poverty. How do we do it all? How do we make it work? And that really comes down to doing the best with what we have, using the resources that we have available to us to their fullest extent, and truly working as a team within our building across all systems to eliminate duplication of efforts and really streamline that process in an interconnected system. And then really empowering and looking at the strengths of the people that we have within our system to be able to pull some of the weight in a lot of this work. So the next part of our presentation kind of looks at how are we targeting that and how are we sustaining with limited resources in the systems that we all kind of work through. So what does our structure look like in terms of that leadership at Forest City Regional? Myself as a building principal work collaboratively with our PBIS coaches literally on a daily basis. It is constant conversation. Hey, I saw this today. I have a question about this. This didn't work. And it's often very informal. We typically have weekly 30-minute meetings where we just kind of touch base and say, hey, this is what was going on. Kind of overarching the three of us, I am appreciative to, for this year, have a full-time dean of students, pre-K to 8, to assist with student discipline. Well, he obviously ties very closely into PBIS and what that looks like. Thankfully, he would never stand up here in this. He would probably punch me if he saw me here doing this in a professional presentation. But in terms of our differences like that, we see very much eye to eye on understanding students and what's best for kids, and truly work really well kind of with that yin and yang approach to supporting students. So that works really well. We also have, within our PBIS system, we have 8 committee chairs who come together monthly to kind of carry the work and the weight. And so you'll see there the 8 chairs that we have. We have a data committee, finance committee, outstanding Forster of the month, Mighty Forster Day, advanced tiers, trading post, ready to ride, and planning and reinforcement. So what those do, our coaches every month, we have a faculty meeting. Those committees comprised of their captain or the committee chair, and then every individual within our building is on a committee and has to support the work of what that committee is doing. It creates vested and collaborative effort in everything we do. So, that also goes back to that framework of PBIS is not just behavior in our building. We use it as a true framework for every decision we make. Every piece of what we do comes back to how to utilize the framework to support kids. So that's kind of just an overview of our structure. And those faculty meetings, we have a faculty meeting every month where contractually the teachers are obligated for 90 minutes. I allot 30 minutes to 40 minutes every month for those subcommittees to do PBIS work. It is the only way that we can sustain within our system. Otherwise, our coaches would be totally drowned all the time. And just because all faculty members are on a committee and all faculty members are part of it, doesn't mean they all buy in. But by proxy, they don't really have much of a choice because it is during their workday, it is their time. They've got to do what is outlined by our coaches. Which has, and it's not many, but the squeaky ones get awfully quiet when everybody else on their committee is working their tails off to make it happen for our kids. So it works really well. And then this kind of ties into that, and I touched on a lot of it with the faculty meetings, committee chair meetings. After our faculty meetings, we have 2 days later, we always have a committee chair meeting where we come back, say, okay, what did you work on in your committees? How did it go? What questions did your committee have? What do we have to address for the next time? We're meeting very often. Also, PBIS and our framework is truly a non-negotiable in the building. And that starts at the beginning of the year with me, with our employee handbook and outlining, this is what I expect to see when I'm walking into your classrooms. And if I don't hear what I've given you as expected, we're having that conversation. And that's often very difficult, especially like coming from my building. I was a student in that building. Many of the teachers there are teachers that I had in elementary school. But if we all believe in what we believe for kids, it takes the time to have those difficult conversations. And then school and community involvement. We created a community collaboration committee last year, and that kind of was the purpose of consolidating all of the things that we say, we need parent input on this, we need parent involvement, we should have parents talking about this. So those meetings we have 3 times a year, and that is for school attendance, looking at where we're at with that federally chronic absenteeism rate and what we need to do in informing parents and educating them. It incorporates PBIS, talking about expectations and reward systems for parents and what they can do at home to tie in. Title I and federal programs where we also need parent input. And then school counseling 339 plan is the last piece that kind of goes into that.
Can you elaborate a little bit, since you're a low economic school? Yes, you said that?
Yes.
Can you elaborate the ways in which you get your parents? I, too, work in a low school, SES school, so I'm just interested. We get very minimal parent involvement. What are some of the ways you get those parents in?
So the question was, being a low-income school, how do we get that parent involvement and what does that look like? And it is a constant struggle. There is no easy, clear-cut answer. The incentives, we've really tried to incorporate having the parents be a part of what the kids are taking home. And then when we're asking for feedback, we're always tying it to an incentive. Usually it's a gift card to our grocery store in the community that most of our parents go to. And just say, if you return this form with your feedback and your input from you and your student, you're entered into a chance to win this gift card. What else?
So we tried to do a lot of diverse things, and actually we went to a session today about parent trainings, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna walk away from this with different ideas. And we all struggle with the same things, getting people into the building, and since COVID, I think it's even more difficult, or at least it seems it. But so our community collaboration committee last year, we reached out to parents that like to share input regularly, and so we gave them the platform, and we're like, come on in, we welcome that input, whatever that looks like. This year, we posted it on social media, we promoted it that way. Those incentives about the gift cards, we have different events throughout the year. So for example, for Title I, we have to do a curriculum night. So at curriculum night, we feed everybody. So we have a really good attendance at curriculum night because we have games there for the kids. So we make it fun. We don't just talk about, this is what we do. Every station is makes it fun and engaging for the families. And if they complete it, they get their free food at the end. But we always have in there a PBIS. That's where Sarah and I last year, our station is always creating a matrix for home and how to support the behavior at home, carrying it over. This year, our goal is to really use our social media. So our feedback from our community collaboration last year was own our messaging and really get behind it. And because if you notice with the algorithms on Facebook and social media, if you don't post regularly, you get 3 likes, no one's really seeing it. But we've gone out of our way to on our Google calendars, today promote this. Every single component of our framework. So just last week we did our November Outstanding Foresters of the Month. So we posted them, but this week we're gonna say, for December, these are things students need to do in order to be recognized as Outstanding Foresters of the Month. Last month, we highlighted a different component of our framework. The 3 weeks before was a different component. In between, we are sharing pictures and all the great things that we're doing. So we are way more intentional this year with the pushing out and owning the messaging to our community. And we are seeing way more clicks and responses and engagements. And it seems like people are finally interacting and engaging with what we're putting out there. So we're excited. We actually now it's November. We're like, oh my gosh, we have our first CCC meeting in a couple weeks. So it's great feedback. Last year, just talking about federal programming and a huge part of the Title I conversations is that student-school compact talks about the communication back and forth between family. We spent a lot of time based on feedback to revise that compact and what does that look like going back and forth.
So Larissa just touched on something that sparked for me. We've worked really, really hard in the last year and a half to change the way we address parents and the language that we're using and trying to really make it readable for our parents and changing, the acronyms, removing that educational jargon, and trying to really target, what is the message we're trying to send here? Why is it so important? And that's with our newsletters, the s'mores, the Facebook posts, trying to make it as targeted and readable as we can for our community.
That suggestion actually came from, we went through the COIN process during COVID, working through our systems, and we had a parent liaison who was not from our district, but helping us review all the components of our systems, and she had said, you're talking above your parents. And as professionals, that's natural, right? I don't want to be embarrassed and make it sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, but it was way over our families' heads. I think in information that we collected, and we collect a lot of data, but the average reading level was roughly 4th grade. So we were really talking over them, so they weren't understanding, which is part of why they stay away. So that was a big part. Yes, question.
Well, not a question, but same situation and all that, but one of our lunch aides is also the PTO mom in our building. And she posts things every day, like announcements that they give to the kids so parents have. So there's a huge social media presence with her, which has drawn in a lot of our people. Like they know what's going on because it's parent to parent. And she's in our school as well. So sometimes you just need that connection of somebody that they feel comfortable with. That's on their level, that they don't feel like, oh, I have to dress up or I have to do that. Our PTO is also taken to, when they have their meetings, they also do a Zoom for the parents who can't get there because they have small kids or they're running people around. They'll come in on their phones, so they have much more engagement with them as well. And we're always there to present at their meetings to help.
Yeah, so for those that are watching this later on, it was just great tips and advice to connect with someone even in your PTO who's in your building that can support your messaging. Ideas are just to use them to really spread positive word, to engage families. Also, childcare is another thing that we provide when we're offering different services in addition to food, to incentivize and make things just a little bit easier for families. So Mr. Zach had mentioned that we have 2 coaches. So just to have an idea, some of you might not know what that looks like when you have 2 coaches in your building. So we did our best to kind of say this is our area, but we help you, like that's not that specific. But generally speaking, Coach 1 generally is that tier 1 systems person. So looking at data evaluations, we use Swiss, so making sure everybody every year has that, has the right access levels. We have a website, so it says managing RFA and SAP. That's what I was alluding to earlier about, that's request for assistance in SAP. So it's one form that we use to initiate referrals. We do parent brochures each year. That coach is really ultimately responsible for ensuring annual reporting goes out. We do stall stories, so we had not great feedback. Mr. Zach does ensure that we have PBIS time each faculty meeting, but I was told straight out that they don't listen to me when I am presenting my data. So I was like, thank you, that's very meaningful. So we literally spend so much time putting PowerPoints together, and they were like, even though we have to listen, we're not listening to you. So I went back to my college days when I used to create stall stories just to be funny. And we are using that theme. We actually have like poster size every trimester. We call it stall stories, and we put data on there so when they're using the bathroom, they could just read it. And no one is complaining. They are actually reading it, and we embed secret messaging in there or riddles for prizes for our teachers, and everyone reads it because everyone wants the gift card, everyone wants the prizes. So funny how, standing in front of them was not working. Even though we were given the time, we were doing it. It just wasn't being meaningful for them. But sticking a poster size in the bathroom, we change it up, embedding little riddles, funny things like one, when we were preparing for the self-assessment, I bolded different letters throughout, and if they were sitting there long enough, it said, email Mr. Zach, chance to win an ice cream. Well, people, they knew. They saw the bold letters, and they put those letters together, and we had people at the end of the year that we gave them a whole Sunday kit. So we just trying to be creative to ensure, like, you could be going through the motions again, but if the feedback is no one, it was frustrating because we're putting so much time into doing things, and everyone's saying, "Whoa, what are we doing for that?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" So being creative. Coach 2 really is drilling down, ensuring that advanced tiers stuff is being taken out. So getting parent letters out, parent permission forms. That initial communication, leading the facilitator trainings each year. We also do a mid-year training just to also thank them. We not only do a refresher in January, but we buy the facilitators breakfast in the middle of the year because we ask them just to come in, and it's a thank you just to keep them going. And we never have we always have enough facilitators, which would be our teachers offering to support on their own time, whether it's check-in, check-out, being a mentor, or just assisting with different interventions, check and connect, things like that. But together, different responsibilities at the coaching level. Mr. Zach mentioned those monthly agendas for the faculty meetings. So each month, Sarah and I will say, all right, here's what we do. Now, at this point, I used this analogy before and I thought it was pretty clever. I said, we kind of are like a well-oiled machine, but once in a while you do need to put a little grease even on a well-oiled machine to keep it moving. So we do have, at this point, it is easy, but it still everything needs eyes to ensure that you have everything moving. The communicating tasks from committees, we do a kickoff presentation and new staff orientation to ensure there's no gaps. So when new staff comes in, whether it's paraprofessionals or teachers, everybody starts on the same page. There's no jargon that we use that we don't go over at those beginning faculty meetings. In a small group, we create and update every year a Tier 1 handbook and an advanced tiers handbook. Together, we are monitoring, we'll go over this in a minute, but monitoring weekly behavior data, updating our advanced tiers data spreadsheet, adding students to check in, check out, overseeing, managing, etc. So lots of stuff.
So we tried to break down the different systems that we do across the school year into beginning, middle, and end of the year, and we broke this into the format of the TFI, so teaming, practices, and systems. So for teams, in the beginning of the year, before we come back to school, we try to add all the important dates for Fidelity implementation into the calendars. That way staff has this for the full year. They know when important meetings are and things like that. As Larissa said, we prep agendas for the year, subcommittee agendas, advanced tiers agendas. We set aside time. Time is something we don't have in schools, but we set aside time for our coaches and admin meetings, our leadership team, to ensure that we are coming to the table to make sure we're doing things the right way. And recruiting new committee members and chairs, delegating responsibilities. This past year, we realigned committees to make sure that every committee had more of an equitable workload. People didn't love that, but we had some committees who were spending over the 40 minutes. They were spending an hour and a half on responsibilities, and some were done in 15 minutes. So to make sure that committees weren't getting burnt out and it was more equitable, we realigned our committees. For practices, every new student has an orientation, and we introduce the framework to them. In the beginning of the year, all students are reintroduced to the framework by reteaching expectations. We have our beginning of the year blowout just to remind students in our school to be ready, respectful, and responsible, and if they are, fun things will happen. We also create a content calendar which has our different themes for the year, dates for blowouts. Reteaches are every Friday, so if you have a major referral that week on Friday, you miss your Forester Friday, which is 15 minutes of a fun activity that students get to choose, and they have a reteach based on data. So if they had a major for physical aggression, that week they would meet about how to build those skills to not have a major in the next week. And then systems, we hold bus driver meetings to review the framework and bus expectations. We find every year our bus drivers are frustrated with the behavior. It's tough on the bus. I couldn't be a bus driver with 70, 80 kids on a bus, but we try our best to support them and make sure that they are comfortable on the bus. We prepare PBIS reward parent letters. We really try to communicate with parents, update SWIS for data. We have Title I parent information sessions. We talk about this at our community collaboration meeting, back to school night, and import new data to make sure that everyone is in our systems.
So our middle of the year Tier 1 management strategies, those are all systems heavy. So like you're not really seeing a lot of teaming things because we're already moving. So the only stuff is just managing the systems. In the middle of the year, that's when we're completing the SAS. That's when we're completing the TFI. We're refreshing, we're doing a possible needs assessment, bus driver surveys for input. When we say middle of the year, we're not thinking like January per se. This could be more like even like March, April-ish. So if you're thinking about like what does this look like when you say middle of the year, we're taking student surveys and feedback, facilitator feedback, so much feedback, but you know what, we review everything. Like our bus drivers completed those feedback forms. Some of them, they were not kind because they were like, go back to those old ways of disciplining students and there wouldn't be any problems on these buses. And we're like, thank you so much for the feedback. And we bring them cookies and coffee again at the next meeting, and we go again on why we handle bus expectations the way we do and why we have the program that we have. All of our engagement surveys, so lots of things, but we're just collecting that data and feedback to tweak. End of year, so this is kind of that very end of the year going through the summer, outlining faculty meeting dates for the following year. Those practices, those reteach lesson plans, again, systems for handbooks. Our elementary school handbook and our PBIS handbook, they are so much aligned. It's just that our PBS one for faculty really drills down information for implementation purposes. Parents only get what they need to know and not overwhelm them. We actually did a little bit different this year where we made a virtual electronic option that really gives parents like the top 4 things they always ask questions about. So we took our handbook, digitalized it, highlighted 4 tabs on the side really about dress code, attendance, grades, and discipline. And those are highlighted on the side, but they can also search in a keyword search so they don't have to flop through the 180-page handbook. So I'm just making it easier. Transparency, like sometimes people do things and they don't want people to know because it's easier when you're transparent. It might be difficult for those conversations at the beginning, but once people understand, they buy in. So that transparency and communication is so important. Ongoing through the year. So aside from just those strategies broken up by beginning, middle, and end, the meetings, our practices, and our system. So progress monitoring, different observations, reviewing anticipated changes, things of that nature. So when it comes to data, and I know we don't have too much time left, so we know what the data is that our schools have. So we have whatever system you have to collect your behavior referrals. We use Swiss, like we mentioned, attendance, academic. We also do a universal screener twice a year, so that also gives a little bit of our social emotional piece. We use the strengths and difficulties questionnaire. Through that process, we monitor each of those. So at the end of every Friday, we have a secretarial staff who pulls the data, and we have a spreadsheet, and it identifies students who are like at 2 majors, they are on the watch list. 3 majors, now we're talking about how to support them. If they're over 6 majors, that would be, you're headed towards our tier 3. So we are pulling that data, and it's not just us, like we have a secretary pulling it, but we are processing and reviewing it. Anyone who jumps out at us as not already being in an intervention or support, we are pulling them through that SAP process. Same thing with attendance and academics. Nurse visits every other week. We are seeking from the nurse our frequent flyers because we have an intervention for that, and all of those different assessments and surveys and data. Obviously, community is really big too. So you have your PAYS data, which can give you a real glimpse, even long term, on whether or not things that you're doing, are they making a community impact long term? So that's good information to know. Demographics, we are changing. I don't know, Mr. Zach, I don't know if it was on that slide. But we are predominantly white, but it is continuing to get more diverse every day. And so we want to make sure that everything we're doing meets not just the majority's cultural needs. So we are doing really our due diligence to ensure that we are looping other families in that have different backgrounds, different beliefs, and getting feedback so we can be the voice for everyone, and we can hear them, let them have their voice. And that feedback, again, so important. RFA, that request for a system, is single stream. So there's not a survey, refer a kid here if you want to see the school counselor, refer them here if you want to do SAP, refer them here for child study. One form, that is it. And then our job is to go through it and kind of streamline the progress monitoring. So we're collecting data, but then identifying whether or not students are meeting their goals and benchmarks, reviewing the general framework, and evaluating our system.
So then kind of wrapping it up and really putting it into practice, what does it look like in terms of if you're in a leadership position, how can you facilitate and help your building meet that F word? And number one, what I really kind of goes down to is invest the time up front and empower the people that you have at your fingertips to help you do the work, because you can't do it by yourself. Number two, embrace the team and make the time. The time up front is well worth it, and we keep saying that, and I know, well, when do you make it happen? Setting that aside on your calendar, making sure that time is sacred, and that time we're meeting and we're working, and if we don't have that, it doesn't work. So making that time, follow up and follow through, check in, provide feedback, Don't be afraid to have the hard conversation when you need to, and also don't stop recognizing your staff and faculty who are doing what you need to do. That's a critical piece. Connect everything back to the system intentionally. When we make a decision, we're always saying, we're doing this because of this. So connect to the framework. We're doing X to address Y need identified by office referrals in grade 2. So that our staff know, hey, this isn't just because they want to change something. Mike's doing this because we saw this need, we're addressing it. And then begin with the end in mind. Have a vision of what it should look like in your building. What could it look like in your building? And then embrace and support the visionaries that you have in your building to meet that goal. And then take the time to reflect and improve. Don't be afraid to break the system and say, hey, this isn't working. We've got to go back. We've got to make it better. Ooh, sorry.
So here's a QR code. Everything in there, feel free to use, steal, whatever makes things easier. So this is for you. So I'll give everyone a chance to take that and save that link. So in there, you'll also find like there's a Google Doc with links. So you might be wondering, well, why is there a Google Doc with links when there's other documents in here? But some of those, it would force you to make a copy of it. So if you were curious as to what that request for assistance form looks like, we gave that to you. So you could look. Every year we edit it based on feedback, but we never start from scratch anymore, which makes things just so much easier. There has been times where we eliminated things because we just, it wasn't being done with Fidelity and we couldn't connect it back to the system like Mike said. So sometimes it just goes back to really assessing what you're doing, why you're doing it, and removing things that are just extra. And any comments or questions? Here's our email addresses, so if you have follow-up questions and or something's not working but you're interested in it inside our folder, we are happy to answer any questions that you may have. And best of luck.
Thank you again to our Forest City elementary school team and for building a folder for us of all your resources. That's super kind and above and beyond. So we just want to again thank everyone for joining us today.